Welcome back to another Roblox Studio tutorial. In today's video, I'm going to show you how you can make a leader stats that keeps track of player deaths, like you see up here in the corner here. And whenever a player dies in the game, like this, then it keeps track of how many times they died up here. Alright, so let's go ahead and dive in and see how we can do this in Roblox Studio. Alright, so to do this, we're going to go over to the server script service and click on the plus sign. Then we're going to be adding a script. Inside the script here, we're going to be doing two different things. The first thing we're going to do is set up a leader stats. And the other thing we have to do is set up a way to keep track of when a player dies so we can add that to the leader stats. So let's go and start by setting up the leader stats. To do that, we're going to say local function. For the name of this function, we can call it onPlayerJoin. Inside the parentheses here, we're going to pass player. Inside this function, we're going to start by saying local leader stats is going to be equal to instance dot new, and then we're going to be creating a new folder. Next, we're going to say leader stats dot name, and this is going to be equal to leader stats. Finally, we're going to say leader stats dot parent is going to be equal to player. So what we did so far is set up a leader stats folder so that we can store different values inside of it. And the value that we want to store is the player's deaths. So let's go ahead and create a value to store that. So we're going to say local deaths is going to be equal to instance dot new. And this time we're going to be creating an int value. Then we're going to set our value's name. And this part right here is what actually displays on the leader stats. So if you want to display something different, then change that right here. Next, we're going to set its initial value equal to 0. And finally, we're going to put it inside the folder. We want this function to run whenever a player joins the game, so we're going to be connecting this function to the player added event. And you can do that by saying game.players.playerAdded :connect, and then inside the parentheses will be the name of the function you want to connect to this event, and the name of that function is onPlayerJoin. Alright, and before we go any farther, let's go ahead and stop here and run the game just to make sure our leader stats are working. So it looks like the leader stats are set up correctly. I can see my player's name along with the death's value, but right now if I try to kill my character, nothing's going to happen with the leader stats. So the next thing we have to do in our script is set up a way to keep track of when a player dies so that we can add to this value right here. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to say game.players.playerAdded :connect, and we're going to be connecting this to a function, but we're going to be doing it a little bit differently. Rather than defining the function outside of the event, we're going to put it right inside the parentheses here. So we're actually going to say function, and inside this first function we're going to pass the parameter player. And this parameter player comes from this event right here whenever the player gets added. So whenever this event happens, it automatically passes this parameter player, which basically just stores the player that joins the game. Inside this first function, we're going to say player.characterAdded :connect. And then we're going to be connecting this to another function we're going to define right here. So we'll say function, parentheses, and then we'll press enter. For this function, we're going to pass another parameter, and this time it's going to be character. And this parameter comes from this event right here. So whenever the character gets added, that gets stored right here. Inside of the second function, we're going to say character, wait for child. Inside the parentheses, we're going to put humanoid. And then outside the parentheses, we're going to say dot, and then died. And then we're going to connect this with one final function. This time, we're not going to have any parameters for our function, but inside the function, what we're going to do is we're going to say player.leaderstats .deaths .value is going to be equal to that same thing, so whatever its current value is, and then at the end here we're going to say +1. So let's go ahead and go through this really quickly and figure out what's going on. So this first one right here is the player added event. So this gets triggered whenever a player joins the game. And it's going to be connecting this with our first function. Inside this first function, we're taking the player, which is the player that joined the game. We're waiting for their character to get added. And when that event happens, we're going to be connecting that with another function. Inside this function, we're taking a look at the character and their humanoid part and waiting for that humanoid part to die. And when that happens, that's when we're going to add one to the leader stats. And we do that by referencing the player, then their leader stats folder, and then the name of the value. And what we're doing is we're taking that current value of it and adding 1 to it. Alright, so let's go ahead and run the code and make sure everything's working. So I'm going to go ahead and kill my character and see if it shows up in the leader stats. And there we go. Whenever my player died, then I get 1 death up here in the leader stats. And if I try it again, then it should go to 2. Alright, so it seems like everything's working, so that's going to be the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed, and stay tuned for the next one.